JFrog Xray, the software supply chain security portion of the platform. What we're going to discuss today is why JFrog Xray is so important and so valuable to organizations around the world. So free and open source packages, as we discussed in the previous session about software supply chain security, remember, 99% of Fortune 500 companies use open source products, which makes up 85 to 90% of all software is made up of those free and open source components. And the thing is security is still an issue. Constantly, a 57% increase from 2020. It's amazing how quickly, and it's actually in some cases more substantial than that the serious number of risks that are embedding most corporation is through the free components that the developers use. Developers themselves need these libraries to perform the task so they don't have to redo something that somebody has already done. So it's an essential part. They just can't cut off the software supply chain. And the JFrog Xray product is there to address these potential security threats and issues. And the thing is, when we start talking about strong security and what companies need to do, right, it's more of a mentality shift. They need to fortify their software by reducing risk, right? Those third-party transitive dependencies, both direct and indirect. The ability to accelerate their releases by addressing those security concerns earlier allows them to focus more on releasing. If it's discovered in release or production, it's more detrimental. It needs to scale with the organization. So, using Artifactory as a centralized repository for all those third-party transitive dependencies, for all the builds, mean that you can have a security tool that's enabled with it, that's always there. One of the major features of this is that most other security solutions in the market are a point solution. Where JFrog really excels is the fact that it is a solution that is continuously, it's constantly evolving and constantly evaluating all the things that you store in Artifactory, meaning that you can address it more rapidly and streamline all the options you have as a security team. Say they come in and they look, they have a place where they can see not only here's the potential threats and issues, but also reduce the time it takes for things like root cause analysis or determining what other things, like a blast radius, what other software teams might be affected by this, maybe by the same other library. Remember we talked about the checksum-based approach for storage? Well, that really fuels the actual, the Xray and its speed and efficiency, because it also can correlate all the other usage patterns of that particular component itself. And when we look at those key threats we talked about earlier in the session before this, third-party transitive dependencies, CVEs, JFrog is a CNA, right? So we're also doing our part to not only provide a tool to companies to evaluate and address these security concerns, but the research that we put into this, the valuable research that we have, we give it back to the community. And it's the first-party components and the third-party components. We'll talk about advanced security and SAST later on, but those third-party transitive dependency components are things that are essential. Also, things like might be non-code issues like malicious packages or private keys, and we'll talk about that in the advanced security portion. And malicious packages, whether they're intentional or not. The thing is, like things like Python. Python have the occasional malicious packages that shows up in the stream to the developer tool in the construction of the software that's valuable to the customer. When they look at what they're building, this gives them a way to go in and make sure they're doing their best possible. And the JFrog Xray security offering, besides being the fact that it's continuous, it's always active, the different levels of detail it provides are things like software bill of materials. We are going to have a whole section. There's actually a whole thing on software bill of materials itself, but basically it's a list of ingredients of all those third-party transitive dependencies, those free and open source components that go into the software. So it's a way for also things like regulated environments, aeronautics, like medical, working with the government. Most companies that deal with them need to provide a software bill of materials to those organizations prior to engagement or as part of the negotiation and sale. On top of that, vulnerabilities, CVEs. We'll discuss how it works. And the thing is, it allows you to go look at those components, whether they're a first party or a third, right? The software that's created or the third party transitive dependencies that are being utilized. Malicious packages that show up in the stream. Like I said, Python, NPM. There are known components that bring in potentially malicious components that can be extremely detrimental. My favorite, operational risk. What operational risk is amazing. It's a way to look at the library itself. How old is it? How old is it compared to newer versions? Is there a newer version? Is the open source project that built this library initially, is it still active? We have found out that over 70% of the libraries that are out there that are being utilized by developers today, most of them are old, abandoned, or just completely turned off. Nobody's done anything with them in years. So it'll be good for organizations to learn this or to set rules and policies on how old a component they'll allow in, because maybe the newer version is more robust and better. And of course, licensing. We can't talk about security without talking about licensing. There's a list of known licenses that are like the GPL, APL, you name it. There's tons of them. There's 437 recognized open source licenses and thousands of others. But the thing is, licensing is important because of the information that when you use a library, depending on the license type, means that you either need to do something or just comply with it, such as if you do use it or modify it, having to return it to the open source project from which it came, right? These are all things, if you're a software developer, you understand. If you're a software development organization, you understand. But so do legal teams, and this helps a lot. So when you look at this, remember, as I mentioned, we are a CNA. We are a certified CNA, and I could not be happier about that. So JFrog is a provider of security data to the world. There is information and data that we are gathering and giving back to the open source community, and we're also ingraining it into our product. We are producing numerous findings all the time. You can go to research.jfrog.com to get all the latest information on how that amazing team is operating. And the thing is that when we talk about this kind of stuff, one of the biggest things that I like is, since we are talking about continuous security, and the fact is that Xray is so efficient because it uses that data from Artifactory, and the symbiotic nature of the two products together allow us to provide continuous security. And since we are updating the database both externally with being a CNA, but also updating our database constantly and providing it to the Xray product, means you can be as close to a zero-day vulnerability detection as possible. There are tons of this information all over the place, all the time when people look at this. And we're not talking about bugs. We'll talk about static code analysis or software application security testing later on, which is part of our advanced security functionality. No, we're talking about the vulnerability itself. And the thing is, these are those third-party solutions where we can identify and analyze the component itself. We can look and help provide information back so that the developers and the security teams can go in and address it. Its symbiotic nature with Artifactory also means that we can also provide the blast radius. If there is a vulnerability with a particular CVE that could be a critical or high issue or deemed a high issue, we can tell you every other software component that is associated with this, other software build that might be using that library, and also, too, how long have you been using that library, right? This is very important information to software development organizations. And the thing is that our security research data and the stuff that we're doing with Xray, we do a lot of things like auto scanning. It's constantly scanning. It's doing earlier, right? We'll talk about shift left later on as part of this. We'll talk about the IDE and the CLI. But this means that you can address things more rapidly. We have many different ways to alert the development organization on the potential threat and issue. In addition, we enhance the CVE data because we are a CVE. So there's even CVEs that are out there that we were not the initial testers on, but we've gone in based on customer feedback, based on potential threats. Also, the stuff we're a security organization, we listen and we make sure, and we're constantly enhancing the data to make it easier for organizations to address these security concerns. We also let you know with it how severe is it. And in some cases, we've actually gone in and disagreed with the initial finding. Maybe moved it up a notch to maybe critical, or moved it down to, let's say, medium, because of maybe the way that the actual the actual vulnerability is being defined, and then is the ratio, is it a 1 to 20 chance it's going to happen or something? Basically our data goes in and says, well, no, actually it's a very specific thing. And because let's face it, most CVE data is very bland. Usually it's a very bland, very vague description. We go in and enhance that data to make it more specific to the CVE itself. We also do in-depth analysis because we have this R&D background, which means that we provide better data to the companies so, like I said, they can address it easier. You can get a better return on their investment by having more specific data than generality. And we also let you know, is there remediation guidance available? Meaning, what will it take to remediate this issue and do it in a way that is more effective? And here is some ways you can do it. And in some cases, we'll provide multiple remediation approaches, and companies can decide what works best for them. So the faster and more rapidly you can learn about the issue, the faster you can go in and address the issue. This is some of the major things that we do. And since we are continuous, we are constantly evaluating. That means you have a better chance of catching it faster than a point solution where you have to instantiate the actual scan itself, when we're constantly evaluating it and also having it as part of the build process and part of the developer experience. So think about that. It's an approach across the entire SDLC, not just one specific place. And when you look at the architecture in which we've done things, we've put a lot of time and effort into things like policies such as licensing, security, and operational risk, making sure that the data that's provided is the most top-notch data available with as much comprehensive detail and remediation detail as possible. As many communication ways, so we can do things such as email an individual to say there's a security issue. We have webhooks that allows you to post to third-party solutions. We have integration into Slack and MS Teams and tools like Jira. So the thing is that not only can you detect and show and notify, but also too, you can do things like fail build. In addition to that, one of my favorite features is the fact that you can go ahead and have a developer pull a library and its transitive dependencies, right? The first, direct transitive dependency they've implicitly stated, and all the transitive dependencies that they're utilizing for those components. You can actually go in and have the software component download into Artifactory, get it evaluated by Xray, and then as an active approach, you can determine to say, hey, by the way, if something is bad here, stop the ability to consume it. So think about this. You can pre-evaluate and sanitize any third-party transitive dependency based on rules you define, even down to licensing or operational risk, the actual age of the library, and prevent it before it gets in the developer hands. That means that is a shift left as possible. The developer is notified that the component that they're using does not meet the strict guidelines of the corporation using it. And the thing is that the way, as I mentioned, since it is continuous, it is always evaluating. It's its own service. It is independent of Artifactory, and it has speed, efficiency, and accuracy baked into it, making it as strong as ever, and making sure that companies are able to address as rapidly as possible, address the issues where it matters most. And the thing is, it can be integrated into Artifactory, into the build process, the developer process, the actions that they can take to, like I said, the faster you can get the information, the faster you can go in and address the issue. You can get reports on this, vulnerability reports, license diligence, violation, operational risk reports. So if your organization, such as your legal team, wants to know, hey, what licenses are we utilizing with the software that we're building? This will allow corporations to easily do it, because every build is a system of record, and we have all the functionality, all the information, because we talked about Artifactory previously. We talked about software supply chain. Well, this is the portion where we take all that information we've gathered in Artifactory and effectively you wrap it in a security way that you can get this information so that security teams, legal teams, build teams all can have this level of detail without having to do a lot, right? It's already baked into the platform. You also get software bill of materials. This is a way to produce that. Like I stated earlier, most companies these days are now requiring that third-party solutions that they buy or they want to use supply a software bill of materials from a legal perspective. They want to make sure that the third-party transitive dependencies that are being utilized meet their license requirements or don't contain any malicious vulnerabilities. They're registered to the source components, things like that. This is information that they do, and we support both SPDX and CycloneDX formats, meaning that you can go ahead and work with a regulated system, such as, like, the U.S. government alone. They require this. This was signed into a law a couple of years ago. So you need to adhere to it. If you want to adhere to it, it's extremely easy to do. Every build you publish to Artifactory can have an Xray is connected to it, can get a SBOM easily in the format requested by the other vendor. We have IDE plugins for IntelliJ, Visual Studio, VS Code, Eclipse, and all those variants. This allows developers, while they're developing, to go ahead, and if you look on the little red dots and orange dots and the yellow, that's actually vulnerability information saying those third-party transitive dependency that you're using have some sort of active CVE around that version. Here's the information on it, and you can determine whether or not it's applicable. If you go with our advanced security product, we'll let you know, is the CV applicable to that actual issue? And with our SaaS, we'll tell you how to fix things like static code problems. But basic Xray support in the IDE will let developers know that third-party transitive dependencies have CVEs around them. Or they can use the JFrog CLI. When you use the JFrog CLI, you can use the audit functionality that we have here. And the audit functionality that we have here allows them to find out if any of those third-party transitive dependencies have any potentially malicious or nefarious components. We also have a thing called FrogBot. Now, FrogBot also, too, you need our advanced security for things like SAST and secret detection and whatnot. But we can also go in and do the basic scan functionality to see if any of those third-party transitive dependencies that are defined inside of, say, in NPM, like I think like the package.json, if there is some sort of vulnerability there that could be potentially nefarious or malicious to the organization. Thank you for your time. And remember, the Xray security product is the foremost fundamental software supply chain platform out there because you control the binaries with Artifactory. Xray is a natural extension to make sure they're safe, secure, and compliant. Thank you so much and enjoy selling.